Hey guys, this is test 47, game 2. This is the circuit load game. It's an incredibly unusual game, so if you had trouble with it or found it strange, you're certainly not alone here. It's an in-out game. That's how I frame it, because if something is on, if a particular switch is on, then we'll say it's in. If it's off, then we'll say it's out. So I consider this to be an in-out, also known as selection game. Now I've laid out a bunch of rules, I'll explain them all. The numbers 1 through 7, the switches, are actually our variables here, and we're going to place them either in or out. Now the rules on the side are the conditional rules. They tell us that if 1 is in, then 3 and 5 are out. So the contrapositive, if either 3 or 5 is in, then 1 is out. We know that if we have 4 in, then 2 and 5 are out. So I've linked those automatically. Contrapositive, if either 5 or 2 is in, then 4 will have to be out. So those are the conditional rules in this game. They also give us a rule that's a little bit complicated. The switch whose number corresponds to the circuit load is on as well. So if we have 5 different switches that are on, then the circuit load is 5, and as such, switch number 5 has to be on. So let's say we had switch number 1 on, and they said we're only going to have one other switch on as well. We know that that switch would have to be switch number 2, because the total of 1 plus something else is 2. And if we had only one switch in, let's say we had only one slot in the in column, that switch would have to be switch number 1, because with only one switch on, then the circuit load of the panel is 1, so switch number 1 would have to be on due to the final rule of the game. So that's essentially what it's saying here. You'll see it in practice over the course of the game. So question number 6 is a typical orientation question. We're just going to take one rule at a time and apply that rule to all 5 choices, looking for violations. So for example, we know that if 1 is in, then 3 and 5 are out. So any choice containing both 1 and 3 or both 1 and 5 is unacceptable and can be eliminated. So we see that choices D and E both mention 1 with either 3 or 5. That's unacceptable, so D and E are both eliminated. We can also use the rule that when 4 is in, then 2 and 5 are out. So you see that choice A is violating that, having both 2 and 4, so A is gone. So we're down to B and C now, and we know that we have the circuit load rule left to deal with. So you see that choice B has 3 switches on, switch number 3 is one of them. This choice doesn't violate any of the other rules, so it's actually our answer, and choice C can be eliminated because it has 3 switches on, yet switch number 3 isn't one of them. So the circuit load of choice C is 3 because it has 3 things on, yet switch number 3 was not one of those. So that's unacceptable, and C was eliminated. Next, number 7, if 1 and 3 were both off. So if 1 and 3 are both off, that means we have remaining 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7 left to play with. That's 5 switches remaining, but there are certainly conflicts within those, so we're not going to be able to have all 5. So they're asking us what could be 2 switches that are both on. It's much easier to have a small circuit load than a large one due to the conflicts here. So I'm just going to run through the choices, and choice A is especially appealing because it mentions switch number 2. So if we had only 2 switches on, then we'd be totally good. So we could have 2 with 6 or 2 with 7. Obviously not 2 with 4 or 5 because 2 conflicts with 4 anyway. 2 and 5 could work though. But anyway, we could just have 2 and 6 or 2 and 7. 2 and 6 is not a choice. 2 and 5 is not a choice. But 2 and 7 is. And that's actually choice A, works out perfectly fine, no conflicts there. So A is actually our answer to question number 7. I will take a look at some of the others for a moment. If we didn't have switch number 2 as one of the ones that we're in, looking at any of the other choices here, you see they all mention 6 and 7, which are essentially interchangeable for us because we're not going to have either 6 or 7 things total, and 6 and 7 don't conflict with anything. So if you were to look at 4 and 6, for example, have 4 and 6 both be in, not necessarily the only 2, of course, so I'll cross those off here because we're using them already. We know that 4 conflicts with both 2 and 5, so 2 and 5 would have to go out. Now we have only 7 remaining. Whether you have 7 in or out, either way, it poses a problem. If you have 7 in, your circuit load is 3, but switch number 3 is not one of those. And on the other hand, if you had 7 out, then you'd have only 2 things, but switch number 2 isn't one of those. So that's where you run into problems, and that's why the others are bad, essentially. Next, number 8, if we had exactly 2 things in. So if we have 2 things in and 2 conflicts with number 4, Of course, 4 is going to be out. They're asking us what must be out. Of course, switch number 4. So for that reason, B is our answer to number 8, just simply following this conditional rule right here. Next, number 9, if 6 and 7 were both out. So if 6 and 7 were both out, then of course we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 left to play with, and of course there are conflicts within those guys. Now they're asking us for the maximum circuit load of the panel. Of course it's not going to be 5 because there are conflicts within these guys, so for that reason I'm going to eliminate E off the bat. Now we also have, 5 conflicting with 2 other things, and we also have 4 and 1 conflicting with 2 other things. So we're not even going to be able to have 4 either. 3 is the highest we could potentially have. So let's see if we could work with that. So because 4 poses so many problems here, forces 2 other guys out, I'm going to put 4 in the out column in order to more easily allow us to have a higher number of things in. Of course, 1 also conflicts with 2 other things, so I'm going to put 1 out to more easily let us reach a maximum, and you see we're left with 3 things, 2, 3, and 5. And we could have all 3 of 2, 3, and 5 in. That works perfectly fine, doesn't lead to any conflicts. We have 3 things in here, and switch number 3 is one of them, so it is possible to have 3 things. So as a result, choice C is our answer to number 9. Next, number 10, if 5 and 6 were both in, what must also be in? So if 5 was in, of course, 1 and 4 are automatically out. Then we have 2, 3, and 7 on the fence. Now, there are actually no conflicts within these guys, so for that reason, we could have all 5 of them. So for that reason, we can automatically eliminate both 4 and 1, since of course they're never going to be in, they're actually out for certain here. But if we had all 5 of them, we can't really narrow down which ones must be in and which ones simply could be in. So let's try to have the fewest number of things in to allow us to more easily learn what has to be in. So could we get away with having only 3 things in? Of course, that would require switch number 3 to go in because we have 3 things in, circuit load rule right here. So that works perfectly fine. Neither 5 nor 6 is a choice, but number 3 is. So for that reason, we know that 3 is a must because we're going to have 3 in no matter what here. Either we have all 5 of them or we just have 3 of them. We can't have exactly 4 because 4 is out. We can't have exactly 2 because we already had 5 and 6 told to us from the question stem that they have to be in. And if we have 2 things, then we got to have switch number 2 in, which would actually increase the number of things into 3. Next, question number 11. What's the maximum circuit load of the panel? Well, what's the maximum we've seen thus far? Even back in question number 10, we saw it was possible to have 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. So for that reason, we know that we can eliminate 3 and 4 off the bat because we know that having at least 5 is possible. Now, could we have any more than 5? No, because there are conflicts. 5 in requires 1 and 4 out. So if you're going to have 5 things in, if you're going to have switch number 5 in, you're going to lose at least 2 off the bat. So for that reason, we can't have more than 5 in this particular scenario. But could we ever have 6 things in? No, because if you're going to have number 5 in, you lose at least 2 things off the bat. And if you have 4 in or 1 in, you lose at least 2 things off the bat. So could you lack only 1 or only 4 or only 5? So if you lacked only 4, you would have 1 in, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, but there are conflicts here because 1 and 5 conflict. Could you lack only 1? Well, if you lacked only 1, you'd have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then of course 5 conflicts with things and 4 conflicts with other things that are in. Could you lack only 5? Well, if you lack only 5, you'll have 1 in, and 1 conflicts with both 3 and 5. So for that reason, you can never lack only 1 thing. You've got to lack at least 2 things. Therefore, the answer to this can't be either 6 or 7. It has to be 5.